How's it going, guys? In this video, I'm bringing you my 2016-2017 NHL season predictions. I was going to have this video earlier today, but I actually started watching the Leafs game, and once Matthews had a hat trick, couldn't stop watching it. If you guys didn't know, he actually put 4 goals in his first game, so that was crazy to watch. And now I'm going to get on to my predictions. So, starting off with the Western Conference, I'm going to go from bottom to top. We have at 14th place the Vancouver Canucks. So this is a prediction a lot of people are making. It's probably because after the first line of the Sedins and Eriksson, they really don't have much forward depth. Defense is pretty average, and the goaltending is not looking too good with an aging Ryan Miller and Jakob Markstrom, who really hasn't done too much. So I think Vancouver is going to finish in the basement of the Western Conference, potentially the basement of the NHL. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Definitely feel bad for them too, because they don't seem to really be rebuilding. So if you're not rebuilding and you're finishing last, not a good combination. In second last, 13th place, I have the Arizona Coyotes. I think they're a good young team, but the big thing obviously is that they are young and they don't really have many veterans on the team, and the young players obviously not a lot of experience. Domi and Duclair had a really good start to the last season, but kind of burnt out towards the end of it. Weren't producing as much. Goaltending is obviously a big issue for Arizona as well. Mike Smith and Domingue. Don't really like that combo, especially for a team trying to make the playoffs. Their defense looks pretty solid with Ekman and Larson. They added Goligoski. But like I said, just don't think there's enough forward depth behind the kids, and the goaltending is not very good. At number 12 here, guys, I have Colorado, and this was a tough pick to make, as the next 4 or 5 teams here fighting for that final playoff spot are pretty much a toss-up for me. Big thing was, I feel like the other teams that are ahead of them, as you will see, made a lot bigger strides this offseason to kind of improve as a team. They have younger players that should be getting better and better, whereas Colorado, I feel like, Eric Johnson's as good as he's going to be, same with Varlamov, probably Duchesne, Tyson Barrie. The only one that can really keep getting better is probably McKinnon, maybe Landeskog. I feel like they definitely need to add some more good young players to that team before they're going to make the playoffs again. At 11th, this is the first team that's not making the playoffs this year that made the playoffs last year, and that's Minnesota. I really see them taking a step back this year. I feel like their core is aging, and it's really going to show. Devin Dubnyk's a pretty good goalie. We'll see what happens if he can, keep the numbers staying pretty good. Obviously, amazing year, or amazing half year 2 years ago. Solid season last year. We'll see what happens this year. Really good defense in Minnesota, obviously. That's why they've been a good team. The forwards, though, I'm not sure about it. They really don't have a true scorer, and I feel like it's really going to show this year. I feel like they're going to kind of get slow, not going to be able to keep up with some of the younger, better teams, and they're not going to make the playoffs. At number 10 here, I have the Winnipeg Jets. Very young team. They have 2 young goalies in Hellebuck and Hutchinson, who I think between the 2 of them should be fine. Defense is very solid. We'll see if they can get Trouba signed or not. If they get Trouba signed, I think I'd have them at 10. If they lose Trouba for nothing, or for nothing impactful, I might even drop them, say, to 11. But for right now, assuming Trouba signs, I'd have them at 10. Another thing is they have really good young forwards. They drafted Laine. A lot of young kids making the team, like for instance Michigan's player there, Kyle Connor. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the Winnipeg Jets. I think they're gonna be fighting for a playoff spot, but falling a little short. Same thing goes for Calgary. Now this is a team a lot of people think are gonna play amazing this year. I personally don't see it. Johnny Gaudreau, obviously an amazing player on forward. Sean Monahan's solid. Bennett's solid. Kachuk, I think, made the team out of camp, so it'll be interesting to see how he does this rookie season. After that, though, they really don't have a lot of scorers on that team. Forward depth's not that great. The defense is pretty good with Giordano, Brody, and Hamilton. And then goalies, they have Elliott, who's a good goalie, but I've never thought he was a great goalie, which some people seem to think he is because of the numbers, but he's never played a full season, I don't think. He's kind of always been a tandem goalie. I might be wrong on this one, but he never seems to play a lot of games. And maybe he did early in his career, but as he's getting older, that doesn't seem to be the case. He's been splitting with Jake Allen the last few years. Before that, he was splitting with Halak. And it'll be interesting to see how he does when he's the true starter, especially as he just keeps getting older. I think he'll be good, but not good enough to get the Flames in the playoffs, as they're going to fall just short. Moving on now to the playoff teams. At number 8 here, I have the Edmonton Oilers, who a lot of people will disagree with, but I'll give you 3 main reasons why I think they're going to make the playoffs for the first time in 10 years. Connor McDavid, if he stays healthy, top 5 in scoring easily. If you have a top 5 scorer on your team, you're scoring more points, you're winning more games. It's simple as that. The second thing is they finally have a top D pair in both Klefbom and Larson. Klefbom was injured almost all of last year. I think he's a very good young defenseman, often overlooked because of how injured he was last year, and the year before that I think he didn't actually play the full season either. So him and Larson I think could be a solid top D pair for the Oilers. And third is the amount of 1-goal games they lost in regulation last year. If they even lost, say, half those games in overtime, so many extra points they would have. And then, like I said, you throw in a healthy Klefbom, you add in a healthy McDavid. Obviously, they lost Hall, which is huge, but between Lucic, Puljujarvi, Draisaitl getting better, I think they can make up the scoring, especially even McDavid playing double the amount of games. I think they can make up his scoring, and I think, honestly, I don't. A lot of people are calling them making the playoffs. I'm not sure if I could say they'll surprise some people, but I think they'll definitely surprise some of the haters and make it to the playoffs for the first time in a while. Now, number 7 here, the St. Louis Blues. So they're falling a bit in my rankings. Keep in mind, though, that the highest they could be, if I think there's 3 Central teams better than them, is 7th, as, like, let's say Anaheim, LA, and San Jose all put up 90 points, and San Jose is the 4th best team in the Central, and they put up 100 points. They're still 7th, and that's kind of what I see happening. I see the Central being a lot better than the Pacific this year, and I see St. Louis probably having a very good season, but the other 3 teams ahead of them in the Central having an even better season. So, reason for this, they lost Backus, they lost Brouwer, they lost Elliott. Jake Allen's going to have to play, like, a ton of more games than he's used to. They have a lot of young players kind of shoved in there. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to work in St. Louis. I think they're still going to be a good team. I just think there's going to be a bit of regression. But like I said, they're still going to be a top 5 team in the West just because of how the divisions work. They're going to be 7th in terms of the standings. Now, number 6 here, guys, we have the Anaheim Ducks. I think they're going to be a good team again this year. Still haven't signed Rackle or Lindholm, so let's just assume they sign both those players, as if they don't, that's a huge loss. That could be missing the playoffs-worthy loss. But right now, they probably will sign both these players. I see them getting 6th in the playoffs. John Gibson's a very good young goalie. I think he should have no trouble with, being the starter there in Anaheim with Anderson gone. And I think they're still going to make the playoffs. I think last year they finished higher than 6th, though, so I had them going a bit lower. Like St. Louis, I think they're going to step back a bit this year, but still be a very good team. Next here at number 5 of the LA Kings. This one's pretty simple. I think they're one of the better teams in the Pacific. Obviously, I have them as the 2nd best team. Kopitar, Doughty, and Quick can pretty much carry that team. As long as you fill it in with some decent players, those 3 are going to get the job done. You should be in the playoffs every year, except for obviously the one year where they just missed. Next at number 4 here are the Dallas Stars. I think Dallas is a very good team. Maybe not this year, but sometime soon. When Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin on the team, they're going to win a Stanley Cup. Like, probably the best duo in the league, I'd say. I think I'd take them over Taves and Kane, at least in terms of scoring goals. Defense, obviously, they added Dan Hamhuis, which is a pretty big add. They got a lot of good young players. Goaltending is a bit of an issue for Dallas with Lettinen and Niemi, but I think they can score so many goals. It shouldn't be too much of an issue for them finishing 4th in the West. Next, number 3 here are the Chicago Blackhawks. Obviously a very good team. Not much to say about them. 3 Stanley Cups in like the last 6 years. I mean, Taves and Kane, Keith, that core. Whatever players you put around them, they just seem to get it done. Number 2 here, this is 2nd in the West. I have the San Jose Sharks. I think they're going to win the Pacific. I think a lot of times the Stanley Cup runner-up kind of steps back. The good thing with them, though, they have a lot of good young players. They have Couture, they have Hurdle, they have Donskoy. They have a good young goalie in Martin Jones, who I think is very underrated, very good goalie. On defense, obviously, Burns and Edward Vlasic. On forward, they got Joe Thornton, Marlowe, Couture. They have a really good mix of players, and I think I've underrated them the last couple of years. Obviously, they made the Stanley Cup final last year, and I think they're honestly going to bounce back and have a very solid season again this year. And finally, at number 1 in the West, I have the Nashville Predators. So I think this will be the first time Nashville ever got first in the West. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but Ryan Johansson playing a full year for Nashville, first line center. That's going to be huge for them. Philip Forsberg, I think, is just going to keep getting better. They have some good young players coming up the system, like Salamaki, Fiala. Defense, obviously, you have Subban and Weber, and then in goal, you have Rene. I think they're just a stacked team, and they're going to do some damage in the West. Moving on now to the Eastern Conference. This one was a lot tougher, I think, to do than the West, as I feel like the East is pretty much wide open. After the top 3 teams, who I guess I won't spoil for you guys yet, but after the top 3 teams, I feel like it could literally be anyone filling in those next 5 playoff spots, and literally anyone could be getting last, and anyone could be getting like 9th place or whatever. I feel like it's just that close in the East, but I'm going to do my best, obviously, to predict it. So 16th place, I had the Carolina Hurricanes. Main reason for this is they just kind of keep selling, keep adding prospects, and I feel like they're not starting to turn that rebuild around yet. They're continuing the rebuild. Obviously, they made that trade to pick up Teravainen from Chicago. They picked up a couple Detroit players now, I think, off of waivers, and Nystrom and Furk. I think they picked up another guy off waivers a couple days ago. So they're kind of just adding pieces, and when there's a team picking up a ton of guys off waivers, it kind of shows you that their team's not as good as these teams that are just giving these guys away for free. They don't have as much depth. Goaltending is probably the biggest thing for Carolina. Cam Ward and Eddie Lax, your 2 goalies, I don't think is good enough to get it done. Defense, after Justin Falk, a very young D-core. Don't want to underestimate them, but I feel like that's obviously, you want to have some more experience there. And then the forward group, after Jeff Skinner, really, who's going to score a lot of goals for you on that team? I don't see anybody doing it. So that's why I have Carolina getting last in the East. At 15th, I have Toronto. This one's going to upset a lot of people. One thing I forgot to mention at the beginning of the video is I knew I was going to piss off anyone who I have their favorite team not making the playoffs, but only 16 teams can make the playoffs, so 14 teams have to miss. So even if you think like 10 teams could make the playoffs, only 8 of them can, kind of thing. Toronto, obviously 15th here. I think they're going to do better than last year. Last year was their worst season in a while. Austin Matthews, like I said, had 4 goals tonight, but I seen one big thing, and that's their defense is not good at all. Frederick Anderson also didn't look that great, but I'm not going to put that against him. I think he's a solid goalie. Biggest thing for Toronto is their defense and obviously all their young forwards. Kind of like Arizona last year, they're probably going to have a really good start to the year and eventually halfway through the season going to start burning out and not producing as much. Next, number 14 here, I have the Buffalo Sabres. This was a tough one for me. I could see Buffalo potentially even making the playoffs in like the 7th or 8th position, but I have a feeling that they're just going to underperform this year. A lot of people have them turning the corner. I think they're going to fall short. Robin Lehner, I'm still not sold on as a starting goaltender. Defense isn't too bad. They have Ristolainen, they have Bogosian, but I don't think it's quite good enough. And in regards to the forwards, they have a pretty solid top 6, but after that, it's not too great. And with Jack Eichel being out the first month and a half, that's a huge loss to their team. So I don't know. I have a feeling that Buffalo's just not going to get it done this year. Maybe next year, but I just feel like not going to be this year. Next, number 3 here at the Columbus Blue Jackets. They're a team that I feel is going to constantly finish between like the bottom of the league and the playoffs for the next few years. Defense is a lot better now, adding Seth Jones. Bobrovsky looked really good at the World Cup, but for them, their forwards really don't have a lot of scores. It's a lot of two-way guys like Saad, Boone Jenner, Foligno, Dubinsky. I just feel like they're a really average team. That's why I have them kind of finishing in an average spot here at 13. Next at number 12 is Ottawa. Sort of similar to Columbus. I think they're an average team, but for different reasons. I think they have average goaltending. I think they have average defense outside of Erik Karlsson, obviously. And then I think their forwards are slightly above average, so that's why they're finishing 12th, but not quite in the playoffs. Probably going to be one of the teams fighting until about a month left, and then it's going to be a little bit too late. At number 11 here are the New Jersey Devils. I think Taylor Hall is a huge addition for them. Obviously, to add him, they had to trade away Adam Larson, so their defense isn't quite as good. Luckily for them, they have one of the best goalies in the world in Corey Schneider, so that's obviously going to make up for it. Hall's going to bring a bunch of scoring to them, but I still don't think they're good enough to make the playoffs. But I think they'll be fighting for a spot and finishing at 11th. At number 10, I have the Philadelphia Flyers. They just squeezed into the playoffs last year with a crazy late run. Another good team, but another team I think is going to fall a little short. Very young team on defense, I think. They have Provorov, they have Ghost. They actually have a couple of younger guys, I think. Goaltending is not too bad with Steve Mason. Forward group's pretty solid. I just feel like they had that huge run last year. If that run doesn't happen, they finish around 10th. So I think you can kind of safely assume that run doesn't happen, and they finish around 10th this year. Now, number 9, I have the New York Islanders. This is probably the toughest one for me. I feel like they are going to be right around the playoffs. They'll probably make the playoffs because I have them not making it. That's how it's going to work. But I think for them, goaltending is going to be an issue. Halak and Greasy, I'm not sure. Halak actually didn't look too bad at the World Cup, but he didn't look that great last year, so I really don't want to base more on the World Cup than the regular season last year. Their defense isn't too bad. Boychuk, Leddy, Hamonic. Then they got some like younger players. And the forward group, though, I feel is definitely lacking. Like after John Tavares, it's a lot of guys that haven't really proven a lot, and I feel like that's honestly gonna come through and show. I feel like it might be a year where they don't obviously do bad. Like if they get 9th place, but it's gonna be a year where they're giving a bunch of ice time to the younger players, and that's going to help them in the future, but for this year, it might cost them a playoff spot. Now, number 8 here, obviously, this is a biased pick. I have the Detroit Red Wings. I really do think, though, they'll be fighting for a playoff spot. Whether they finish 7th or 10th, that's the question. I have them finishing 8th. I think Mrazek's a very good young goalie. Their defense isn't looking too great, especially with Cronwall injured, but if he can get back pretty soon, I think between him, DeKaiser, Green, and some of the younger kids they have called up, they should be able to, like, at least hold their own. And then forward-wise, I think, honestly, they'll be just as good as they were last year. Datsuk only played, I think, 50 games last year, maybe less. I might actually be giving him more. Nielsen's coming in, a very good center. I forgot to mention, too, with the Islanders losing Nielsen, that was another big reason why I thought they'd take a step back. But anyways, moving back to Detroit, Nielsen and Tatar looked really good together. They'll still have Zetterberg. Larkin's going to have, 1 year under his belt. He should be an even better player. They got Vanek, they got Nyquist. I think they're set at forward. I think they're very good there. Defense is the biggest question for them, but if they can just hold their own, I think they can possibly sneak into the playoffs for one last year at the Joe. Next year at number 7, I have the Boston Bruins. So after just missing the playoffs the last couple of years, I had them just making it this year. Kind of like Detroit, I think their defense is the biggest question mark. Chara's really getting old, really getting slow. The good thing for them, though, they have Tuukka Rask, I think, is a world-class goaltender. Really good group of forwards with Bergeron, Krejci, Marchand. So that's kind of why I give them a slight edge on Detroit. I feel like their goaltending's better. Defense probably around the same, and then the forwards around the same, possibly a bit better. So I think Boston's finally going to get back in the playoffs this year. At number 6, I have the Florida Panthers, so doing a little worse than they did last year. I think that was kind of like a miracle season for them, though. Still making the playoffs. As long as Luongo can stay healthy, him and Reimer should be fine in net. They got Aaron Ekblad, who's going to be a workhorse defenseman. They added Keith Yandel, Demers. On forward, I think they have a good group of young forwards, so a very solid team, and should have no problems making it back into the playoffs. Next year at number 5, I have the New York Rangers. Now, this is a pick I'm kind of worried about. I feel like the Rangers are either going to finish top 5 in the East or somewhere near the bottom. Henrik Lundqvist is a very good goaltender, but between injuries and age, I could see sometime soon him not being as good. And if that happens this year, that's really going to hurt the Rangers' chance to make the playoffs. But if he stays healthy, obviously that's going to make their playoffs pretty much a certain thing. Defense-wise, McDonough is still a very good defenseman. Girardi and Stahl are fine. I think their defense, obviously without Yandels and Boyle, isn't as good, but still should be fine. And then forward group, they actually have probably one of the best depth, group of forwards in the NHL in terms of like their 4 lines, I think. So that's a huge bonus to them. So basically, it kind of all relies on Lundqvist as well as some of the younger defensemen they have called up. How are they going to play? If they play fine, I see New York having a very good season, finishing 5th in the East. Next, guys, at number 4 here, I have the Montreal Canadiens. This is another pick I'm pretty worried about. Like I was saying earlier, after the top 3 teams in the East, I feel like it's honestly a crapshoot. Anything could happen. But if Carey Price is healthy the whole year, the Canadiens make the playoffs. That's just a fact. If Radulov can score, if Sergachev can step up and play good D his rookie season, if Weber can play solid D, I don't think he's as good as Subban, but if he can play, what he did last year, I guess, and maybe even a bit better than he did last year, the Canadiens should be fine, should be back in the playoffs, and basically just kind of ride Price throughout the regular season. Now, guys, moving on to the top 3 teams in the East. I feel like these 3 teams are so much better than the rest of the teams. That's why I was saying really hard to judge the rest of the teams, but I think these 3 teams guaranteed playoffs. I'm not sure if they'll finish 1, 2, 3, but they'll probably be close. So at number 3, I have the Pittsburgh Penguins. Obviously, Crosby, Malkin, Kessel, defending Stanley Cup champions. They got 2 good goalies in Fleury and Murray. They got Chris Letang. I don't really need to say more. At number 2, I have the Washington Capitals. They won the President's Trophy last year. Very good team, very good goalie in Holtby. They got Ovechkin. They got Kuznetsov, a stacked team. I have them winning the Metropolitan and finishing 2nd. And then finally, at number 1, I have the Tampa Bay Lightning winning the Atlantic as well as winning the Eastern Conference. I think just like Washington, they're a stacked team. They have 2 good goalies in both Ben Bishop and Vasilevsky, which gives them, some options, I guess. And if Bishop isn't playing that great, very solid defense, amazing forward depth. I think it's going to be between them and Washington, possibly for the President's Trophy, and it might be Tampa Bay taking it home. So, anyway, guys, those are my predictions for the 2016-2017 season. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed them. I'm sure a lot of you disagreed. I'd love to hear why in the comments section. Obviously, these predictions aren't going to be right. I'm just kind of doing my best guess. I'd love to hear what you guys think. It's always interesting for me to read the different predictions, I guess, for this season. So, anyway, guys, that's it for the video. If you enjoyed it, leave a thumbs up. I'm going to watch this Oilers-Flames game that's going on right now. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a nice day. Goodbye.